If you had told me a year ago that the hardest part of my divorce wouldn't be losing my husband, my home, or the life I'd spent 12 years building, I would have laughed. I was wrong. The hardest part was watching everyone I loved slowly decide that I was the villain. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until recently, I thought I knew exactly who my husband, Daniel, was. We had been married for 9 years. 9 years of ordinary life. We had arguments, like every couple. We had bills, vacations, family dinners, and weekends where neither of us wanted to get out of bed. But I never imagined that one day Daniel would look at me across a courtroom and tell a story about our marriage that barely resembled reality. And even worse? People believed him. It started 3 months before I filed for divorce. Daniel came home late one Thursday night. He dropped his keys on the kitchen counter and didn't say hello. I was sitting at the table, going through our bank statements. "You're late," I said. He stared at me. "Do you ever think about anything besides money?" I frowned. "What?" He shook his head. "Forget it." That became his favorite phrase. Forget it. Whenever I asked what was wrong, he would say nothing. Whenever I tried to discuss our finances, he accused me of controlling him. Whenever I asked where he had been, he told me I was paranoid. Then, one evening, he came home with a suitcase. I remember staring at it for several seconds. "What's that?" "I'm leaving." My stomach dropped. "For how long?" Daniel looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. "Indefinitely." I thought it was a threat. I thought we'd argue, he'd cool down, and we'd talk the next morning. Instead, he walked out. 3 days later, I received divorce papers. I was devastated. But what happened afterward was worse. Daniel began telling people that I had driven him away. He said I was controlling. He said I had isolated him from his friends. He said I constantly humiliated him. And then he told everyone something completely untrue. He claimed I had cheated on him. I hadn't. Not once. But Daniel was convincing. He cried when he told the story. He showed people carefully selected messages. He presented himself as a broken husband who had finally escaped an emotionally abusive wife. Jessica, my best friend, called me one evening. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered. I felt like someone had punched me. "Jessica, you know me." "I do." "Then believe me." There was a long silence. I need time." That was when I realized Daniel wasn't simply leaving me. He was building a world where everyone would hate me. My mother stopped defending me. Some mutual friends stopped answering my calls. Even neighbors began looking at me differently. Then Daniel filed for full control over our shared finances and demanded that I pay him a large settlement. His attorney claimed I had financially manipulated him throughout our marriage. It was absurd. But on paper, Daniel's story looked frighteningly clean. My lawyer, Michael Reynolds, studied the documents for almost an hour before looking up. "Sarah, I'm going to ask you something." "What?" "Is there anything Daniel knows about your life that could be used against you?" I thought about it. "No." Michael leaned back. "Then we're going to find out why he's so confident." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But 3 weeks later, Michael found something. And when he showed it to me, my hand started shaking. Because Daniel had made one mistake. One tiny mistake. And that mistake was going to change everything. Michael slid a folder across his desk. "I found something." I opened it carefully. Inside were copies of bank statements, emails, and several documents I had never seen before. "What am I looking at?" "Daniel's financial records." I frowned. "Why?" "Because his story doesn't match his money." My heart started pounding. Michael pointed to several transactions. "Daniel told everyone you controlled the finances. He claimed you kept him from accessing money." "I never did that." I know. But look at these transfers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had moved between accounts during the months before Daniel left. I stared at the dates. Most of them happened while Daniel was supposedly working late. Where did this money go? Michael tapped one account number. A private account Daniel opened 6 months before he left. I felt sick. Why would he hide that from me? That's what we're going to find out. Then Michael showed me something else. An email. It had been sent from Daniel's personal account to someone named Mark Collins. The message was only 3 sentences long. But one sentence made my blood run cold. Once Sarah looks like the unstable one, nobody will question why I left. I read it twice. Then again. My hands began trembling. Where did you get this? His old backup account. His attorney accidentally disclosed the records during discovery. For the first time since Daniel left, I felt something other than fear. Hope. But Michael wasn't smiling. Sarah, this helps us. A lot. But we need more. More? He nodded. One email can be explained away. He closed the folder. We need to prove the entire story he told was a lie. And that meant going to court. Against the man everyone already believed. The days before the hearing were the loneliest of my life. Daniel's story had spread so far that correcting it felt impossible. At the grocery store, I noticed 2 women whispering while looking at me. One of them recognized me. I knew because she suddenly stopped talking. I kept walking. I had learned not to react. At home, I stopped checking my phone because every new message seemed to hurt more than the last. Some people called me selfish. Others asked how I could destroy a good man. Nobody asked what had actually happened. Then my mother called. Sarah, Daniel came by yesterday. My stomach tightened. Why? He wanted to talk. About what? There was a pause. About you. I closed my eyes. What did he say? He said you're refusing to cooperate with the divorce. He says you're trying to punish him. I almost laughed. I've done everything he asked. I know. Her voice sounded uncertain. But Sarah, maybe you should just settle this quietly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, he's lying about me. I know you believe that. Believe? My voice cracked. I'm not asking you to believe something. I'm telling you what happened. Silence. Then she whispered, I just don't know anymore. That sentence broke something inside me. After we hung up, I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. Not because of Daniel. Because I realized how powerful his lies had become. He didn't need evidence. He only needed people to doubt me. The next morning, Michael called. We have a problem. I immediately sat up. What happened? Daniel's attorney submitted a statement from Jessica. My heart stopped. Jessica? Yes. What did she say? Michael hesitated. She says you frequently talked about leaving Daniel and taking everything from him. I felt sick. Jessica had been my best friend for 15 years. She knew every detail of my marriage. And now her words were being used against me. Is it true? Michael asked. No. I swallowed hard. I talked about leaving because Daniel had already changed. I was unhappy. That's not the same thing. Michael nodded. I believe you. But the court needs proof. That evening, I opened an old box in my closet. Inside were photographs, birthday cards, receipts, old letters, and years of memories. I wasn't looking for nostalgia. I was looking for evidence. Then I found something I had completely forgotten about. A small external hard drive. Daniel and I had used it to back up our family computer years earlier. I connected it to my laptop. Most of the files were useless. Photos. Old documents. Vacation videos. Then I found a folder created 2 months before Daniel left. Its name was simple. Insurance. I opened it. There were dozens of files. And one video. Recorded from our kitchen. I clicked play. Daniel appeared on the screen. But he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to someone else. And what he said made my entire body go cold. I watched the video 3 times before I could even breathe normally. It had been recorded by an old security camera we'd installed in the kitchen years earlier. I had completely forgotten that the recordings were automatically backed up. Daniel was standing near the counter. His voice was calm. Almost cheerful. I already told you, he said. She'll look unstable when this is over. A man's voice came from behind the camera. Are you sure? Daniel laughed. Sarah gets emotional. That's all I need. I froze. Then the other man asked, and the money? Daniel lowered his voice. Once the divorce is finalized, I'll move what's left. My hands began shaking. I immediately called Michael. He arrived at my apartment less than an hour later. We watched the recording together. When it ended, Michael remained silent. Can we use it? Potentially. Potentially? He looked at me seriously. Sarah, we need to establish when this was recorded, who that man was, and whether the file has been altered. I nodded. Do whatever you need. Michael copied the original file and sent it to a forensic specialist. The next morning, we received the preliminary report. The video was authentic. The timestamp was intact. It had been recorded nearly 2 months before Daniel filed for divorce. But there was something else. The voice of the other man had been partially captured. Michael had an idea. Do you recognize him? I listened again. Something about the voice bothered me. Then I realized why. That's Mark. Mark Collins? I nodded. Daniel's business partner. The same Mark Collins whose name appeared in Daniel's hidden financial records. Suddenly, everything connected. The secret account. The transfers. The emails. The recording. Daniel hadn't simply left me. He had planned the entire thing. Michael leaned forward. We're going to subpoena Mark. My heart pounded. What if he refuses? He won't have much choice. 2 days later, Mark's attorney contacted us. He wanted to negotiate. Michael refused. We're going to court. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. Daniel seemed completely confident. When I saw him outside the courthouse, he smiled. That same charming smile everyone trusted. Sarah, he said quietly, you should really stop fighting this. I stared at him. You lied about me. His expression didn't change. No one is going to believe you. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I simply looked at him and said, maybe they won't. I stepped past him. But the evidence will. I didn't know it yet, but Daniel had no idea what was waiting for him inside that courtroom. And neither did everyone who had believed him. The courtroom was colder than I expected. I sat beside Michael while Daniel sat across the room with Laura, his attorney. He looked completely relaxed. Almost amused. I wondered how someone who had destroyed my reputation could sit there without showing even a trace of guilt. Judge Harrison entered, and everyone stood. The hearing began with Laura presenting Daniel's version of events. She spoke confidently. She described me as controlling, manipulative, and financially abusive. Every accusation felt like another stone being placed on my chest. Then she called Daniel to the stand. He looked toward the judge with a wounded expression. Sarah changed after we got married, he said. I stared at him. He continued. She controlled every dollar. She constantly accused me of cheating. She isolated me from my friends and family. None of it was true. But he sounded sincere. That was what made him so dangerous. Laura presented messages between us. Most were real. But they were carefully selected. One message showed me writing, "I can't do this anymore." Another said, "If you keep lying to me, I'm done." Without context, they made me look unstable. I could feel the judge studying the documents. Then Laura turned toward me. "Isn't it true that you threatened to leave your husband?" I swallowed. "Yes." Daniel's attorney smiled. "Isn't it true that you told friends you wanted to take everything from him?" "No." She showed another message. "You wrote, 'I'm going to make sure he regrets what he did.'" "Yes." "So you were angry?" Of course I was angry. Laura looked satisfied. Nothing further. Michael stood. He didn't start with the recording. Instead, he asked Daniel about the finances. "Did you have a private bank account before the separation?" Daniel hesitated. "I had a personal account." "Did Sarah know about it?" "No." Michael handed the judge a document. "And did you transfer over $80,000 into that account before leaving the marital home?" Daniel's face changed. "I don't remember." Michael continued. "Did you also transfer money to an account connected to Mark Collins?" Laura immediately objected. "Relevance." Michael calmly replied, "It goes directly to the financial allegations made against my client." Judge Harrison allowed the question. Daniel shifted in his chair. "I don't know what you're talking about." Michael looked at him. "Then perhaps you'll remember after you see this." He placed another document before the judge. The courtroom became silent. I looked at Daniel. For the first time that morning, he wasn't smiling. Michael returned to his seat. "We'll call our next witness." The courtroom doors opened. And Mark Collins walked inside. Daniel went completely pale. Mark Collins walked toward the witness stand without looking at Daniel. The courtroom was completely silent. I watched Daniel's hands. They were trembling. That was the first time I had ever seen him look afraid. Mark was sworn in, and Michael approached him. "Mr. Collins, do you know Daniel Mitchell?" "Yes." "How long?" "About 6 years." "And did you discuss Daniel's divorce with him before he left his wife?" Mark glanced at Daniel. "Yes." Daniel's attorney immediately stood. Objection. Judge Harrison raised a hand. Overruled. Continue. Michael placed a photograph on the desk. "Do you recognize this?" Mark nodded. "That's Daniel's kitchen." "Were you there?" "Yes." "Why?" Mark took a breath. "Daniel asked me to help him." "Help him with what?" Mark looked uncomfortable. "With making Sarah look responsible for the marriage ending." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Daniel's attorney jumped to her feet. Objection. Overruled. I felt my heart pounding. Mark continued. "Daniel told me Sarah was going to leave him. He said if he could make everyone believe she was unstable and controlling, he could get a better settlement." Daniel suddenly shouted. "That's a lie." Judge Harrison struck his gavel. "Mr. Mitchell, you will remain silent." Michael showed Mark several documents. "Did Daniel transfer money to the private account you discussed?" "Yes." "Did you help him?" Mark lowered his eyes. "Yes." Daniel stared at him with pure hatred. Michael then asked the question that changed everything. "Why?" Mark swallowed. "Daniel promised me a share of the money." The courtroom went silent again. I looked toward the judge. He was reading the documents carefully. Then Michael played the recording. Daniel's voice filled the courtroom. "She'll look unstable when this is over." I watched the judge's expression change. Then came Daniel's next words. "Once the divorce is finalized, I'll move what's left." Nobody spoke. Not even Daniel. The recording ended. Michael turned toward the judge. Your Honor, this recording was authenticated by a forensic specialist. The timestamp places it nearly 2 months before Mr. Mitchell filed for divorce. Judge Harrison looked at Daniel. Mr. Mitchell, do you wish to explain this? Daniel stood. For the first time, he didn't look confident. I was angry. The judge stared at him. Anger does not explain financial transfers, fabricated accusations, and a coordinated attempt to influence witnesses. Daniel's face went pale. I looked across the courtroom. Jessica was sitting in the back. Her eyes were filled with tears. She finally understood. Daniel had lied to everyone. But there was still one thing I didn't know. What would the judge decide? Because proving Daniel was a liar was only the beginning. I still had to live with the consequences of everything he had done. The courtroom remained silent after the recording ended. Daniel sat completely still. For months, he had controlled the story. He had told everyone what happened. He had decided who was guilty and who was innocent. Now, for the first time, he had nothing left to say. Judge Harrison reviewed the documents Michael had submitted. Then he looked at Daniel. Mr. Mitchell, your testimony today is directly contradicted by financial records, electronic correspondence, and sworn testimony. Daniel's attorney leaned toward him and whispered something. He shook his head. No. Then he stood. I want to explain. Judge Harrison nodded. Daniel looked at me. Sarah, I never wanted things to go this far. I almost laughed. You planned this. I was scared. You lied about me. I thought you'd take everything. I never wanted your money. He looked down. For a moment, he almost seemed like the man I had married. Then he said something I'll never forget. I didn't think anyone would check. My chest tightened. That was his mistake. He hadn't thought anyone would check. He thought his charm would be enough. He thought my silence meant weakness. And he thought people would always believe him. Michael presented one final piece of evidence. It was an email Daniel had sent to Mark 3 days before leaving our home. The subject line was simple. Final plan. The email contained instructions about transferring money, what Daniel should tell mutual friends, and how he wanted me to react. But the final sentence was the worst. Once everyone thinks Sarah is the problem, the court will see me as the victim. Judge Harrison read it twice. Then he delivered his decision. The court rejected Daniel's financial claims against me. The hidden funds were ordered to be disclosed and considered part of the marital assets. Daniel's accusations against me were given little weight because the evidence showed he had deliberately manipulated the situation. I won. Not because I had told the better story. Because the truth had finally been proven. When we left the courtroom, I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. Jessica approached me first. Sarah. I stopped. She was crying. I'm sorry. I didn't answer immediately. She continued. I believed him. I know. I should have believed you. I looked at her. I wish you had. She nodded. Then my mother came over. She hugged me tightly. I knew my daughter wasn't that person. I closed my eyes. I needed you to remember that before today. She started crying. I know. Across the courthouse hallway, Daniel stood alone. No friends. No supporters. No confident smile. Just a man staring at the floor. He looked up at me. For a second, our eyes met. Then I walked away. I thought that was the end. But I was wrong. Because the court hearing had changed more than the outcome of my divorce. It had changed the way everyone saw Daniel. And now the people who had believed his lies were starting to discover what he had hidden from them too. 3 months after the hearing, my life was almost unrecognizable. Daniel had moved out of state. His business partnership with Mark collapsed, and several people who had once defended him stopped speaking to him. But strangely, none of that made me happy. For a long time, I thought justice would feel like revenge. It didn't. It felt like finally being able to breathe. I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't the house Daniel and I had shared. It wasn't filled with years of memories. And somehow, I loved it. For the first time in years, everything inside belonged to me. One Saturday morning, Jessica came over. She brought coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. "How are you really doing?" I smiled. "I'm okay." She looked at me. "That's it?" I laughed. "That's it." She apologized again. This time, I accepted it. Not because I had forgotten what happened. Because I didn't want Daniel's lies to control my relationships forever. My mother also changed. She stopped asking questions about Daniel. She stopped trying to understand his excuses. Instead, she started asking me about my plans. And I finally had plans. I enrolled in a business course I had postponed for years. I started working on a small consulting business. I traveled. I made new friends. I learned that rebuilding your life doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens quietly. One morning at a time. One decision at a time. Then, almost 6 months after the hearing, I received a letter. It was from Daniel. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. There were only a few paragraphs. He said he was sorry. He admitted that he had lied. He said he had convinced himself that controlling the story was the only way to protect himself. At the end, he wrote, "I know you probably don't forgive me. But I needed you to know that you were telling the truth." I folded the letter. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the most important thing Daniel could finally give me wasn't an apology. It was confirmation. For months, I had questioned myself because everyone else questioned me. That was the cruelest part. When enough people tell you that you're the problem, eventually you start wondering if they're right. But the courtroom taught me something I'll never forget. Truth doesn't always win quickly. Sometimes it loses friends. Sometimes it loses family. Sometimes it sits alone in a courtroom while a lie gets all the attention. But truth leaves evidence. And eventually, someone has to look at it. I still think about that day sometimes. About Daniel sitting across from me. About the recording playing through the courtroom speakers. About the moment his carefully constructed story collapsed. But I don't think about him anymore when I think about the future. I think about myself. The woman who survived being misunderstood. The woman who lost almost everything except the truth. And the woman who finally learned that being believed isn't what makes you innocent. Knowing who you are does. And once the truth finally came out, I stopped trying to convince everyone. I simply started living again.